Devon pressed his face to the glass. Inside the boardroom, 12 executives sat beneath white light, skyscrapers glittering behind them. At the head of the table, Eleanor Blackwood signed, hands sharp, deliberate, a storm contained in motion. Beside her, Richard, mid-40s, stumbled through a translation that mangled every intent. She says, "Potential profit, maybe long-term value." He lost the thread. Across the table, Bradford Sterling chuckled. The sound carried money and condescension. "Richard," he said, stretching the name, "maybe you should have brought a real interpreter. This is embarrassing." He turned to Eleanor and patted her sleeve like she was a child. "Don't worry, honey. The adults will handle this." The word honey hit the glass like a slap. Outside, Devon's fingers curled tight. The old woman's hands still moved angry. Precise, logical. He could feel meaning vibrating through the air between them, the shape of sentences he already knew by heart. Then his own hands began to move, small, unconscious mirrors of her, hidden at his side. "Why won't you listen? You ignore data." He wasn't guessing. He was fluent. A 10-year-old janitor's son, badge still clipped crooked to his hoodie. Fluent in American Sign Language. The only person on the 39th floor who actually understood what was being said. Bradford kept smiling, still tapping Eleanor's arm, still talking down to her like a teacher, soothing a restless student. Devon's heart pounded hard enough to blur his reflection. He knew exactly what she had said next, and exactly what he had to do. He grabbed the handle, cold metal. The hinge sighed. 12 heads turned. Silence stretched, bright and brittle. Richard frowned first. "Excuse me, young man, you can't be in here. This is a private meeting." Devon swallowed. "I'm sorry, sire," he said, voice thin but steady. "That's not what your mother said." Every face pivoted. Bradford's smirk deepened. Richard blinked, baffled. "What?" "You translated it wrong," Devon said. "She wasn't talking about profit potential. She was talking about responsibility, community investment, sustainability." He turned to Eleanor and signed clearly, "I understand you." Eleanor froze. Her eyes flicked up to meet his. Her hands shaped a small, sharp question. "How?" he answered before he could doubt himself. "I learned I can help." For half a second, no one breathed. Then Bradford's laugh cracked through the air. "Oh, this is rich. Business advice from children." He leaned back, savoring it. "What's next?" "The intern running the company. I don't know who he is," Richard said quickly. "He's staff. He shouldn't be here." Devon stayed planted. "My mother is Rosa Martinez. She cleans this floor. I saw Mrs. Blackwood wasn't being understood." "That's not right." Eleanor signed again, cautious but curious. Devon followed effortlessly. "She's asking how I learned ASL." He said, "And if I'm professional." Bradford waved a hand. "Ridiculous. Richard, get him out before this becomes a circus." But Eleanor kept signing fast now. Frustration turning kinetic. Richard tried to follow and failed. His hands tangled, grammar collapsing. "Mom, slow down," he pleaded. Devon stepped forward. "She says she wants to let me try." He translated evenly. "If someone can actually understand her, she wants a voice she can trust." Bradford's smile sharpened. "All right, kid, let's make this interesting." He pushed back from the table, enjoying his own cruelty. "If you can really understand her, prove it. If you waste our time, your mother's done, fired today. But if you're right, I'll donate 100 grand to any charity Mrs. Blackwood picks." Bradford, Dr. Catherine Wilson snapped. "That's outrageous." He ignored her. "High stakes make good theater." From the doorway came a gasp. Rosa stood there, mop still dripping. "Devon," she whispered. "Mio, please." He didn't look back. He looked at Eleanor the way her eyes had dulled under years of being misunderstood, and nodded once. "Test me," he said. Bradford's grin widened. "Gladly. Richard, ask for the financial breakdown budget. Timeline. Roy, let's see the prodigy perform." Richard turned, signing awkwardly, skipping half the terms. Eleanor sighed and answered anyway. Hands steady, elegant. Devon translated in real time. 3-building project. 2-acre site in the South Bronx. Building A, 120 units for single-parent families. Building B, 100 for seniors. Accessible. Building C, 80 for people with disabilities, ADA compliant. Total 300 units. Budget $50 million. 34 for construction. 8 for community facilities, 6 for operations, 2 contingency. Dr. Wilson's fingers froze on her tablet. "That's exact," she said quietly, word for word from the proposal. A ripple crossed the room. Paper rustle. Throat clears. Recalculating power. Bradford's voice cut through. "Cute memorization trick, but you could have peeked at her notes." "I haven't," Devon said. "Ask something she didn't prepare." Bradford smirked. "Fine. Tax implications, year 3. Include city projections and market fluctuations." Richard mangled the question again. Eleanor read enough to reply, fingers slicing the air. Devon caught it. "Annual tax increase about 2%. Qualifies for LIHTC credits offsetting the rise. Federal incentives and inclusionary zoning bring net savings of $1.8 million over 5 years. Dr. Wilson checked her data. "Correct, down to the decimals." Bradford's smirk faltered. A bead of sweat glinted under the lights. Eleanor's next signs came fast and clipped. "You didn't read the report." Devon translated. "Steady. She asks if Mr. Sterling actually read the full 81-page Columbia impact study, or just the executive summary." A couple of board members stifled laughs. Bradford cleared his throat. "I reviewed relevant sections," she says. Devon added, "The relevant sections are the 78 pages you skipped." The air shifted. For the first time, Eleanor looked taller than anyone in the room. Bradford shoved his chair back, coming around the table, towering over Devon. "You think you're clever," he hissed. 10 years old, pretending to be an interpreter." "I'm not pretending," Devon said. "Then prove it again." Bradford yanked a notepad, scribbled furiously, tore off the sheet, and slid it to Eleanor. "Read. Respond." Eleanor scanned the page, eyebrow arched. She began signing slowly, each motion deliberate, sculpted. Devon gave her voice shape. "She says you're using big words to hide a small idea. She agrees on fiduciary duty, but asks how you define value. If value means this quarter's profit, yes, this project isn't optimal. But if value means reputation, morale, goodwill, and long-term stability, it's priceless." She asks whether Mr. Sterling's timeline refers to the company's future or the time until his bonus vests. Dr. Wilson couldn't suppress a grin. Gregory Taylor chuckled aloud. Even Richard blinked, impressed. Bradford's face flushed crimson. "This is absurd." Eleanor's fingers flicked once. Sharp. Devon translated without missing a beat. "She says that's what people say when they're losing." The line landed like a gavel. For 3 long seconds, no one moved. Then Dr. Wilson stood. "Enough. We just witnessed effective communication for the first time in years. Let's listen." Eleanor's gaze softened. She turned to Devon, nodding once approval. "Gratitude." A passing of weight. Her hands rose again. 3 measured signs that glowed like a verdict. "Let us begin." Devon exhaled. "She says," he told the room, "let's begin." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was permission. This story is for anyone who's ever been underestimated. If you found yourself holding your breath for Devon, tap like it tells us you were in his corner. If you believe intelligence and courage beat arrogance every time, hit subscribe and join our community of fighters and thinkers. And we want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us about a moment when someone misjudged you and you proved them wrong. The silence after Eleanor's words hummed like voltage. It wasn't fear anymore, it was focus. Devon stood beside her at the end of the long glass table, still feeling the tremor in his wrists, every eye in the room fixed on the pair, the woman no one had truly heard in years, and the boy who had given her voice shape. Eleanor's hands rose again. Devon steadied himself, drawing a slow breath through his nose. He matched her pace, each sign like a gear locking into place. "She says," he began, "thank you for your time, for your patience, and for allowing this conversation to exist." He paused, caught her next phrase. "She says, this project is not charity. It's infrastructure. It will feed jobs, reduce emergency costs, and build long-term equity. It's math, not mercy." The room leaned forward. Even the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop listening to itself. Eleanor continued. Her movements were swift now, alive, half calculus, half conviction. Devon translated the rhythm of her anger into calm speech. "She says the city has 22 million square feet of unused property while families sleep in cars. She says the numbers don't lie, but men sometimes do. She says the community deserves transparency." Dr. Wilson scribbled notes, nodding. Gregory Taylor, usually skeptical, murmured, "She's right about the zoning buffer. We can push variance through." Devon's chest burned with pride. He could feel her ideas spilling clean into the air, finally unmuted, finally whole. But then, a flicker of light beneath the table. Bradford's hand, half hidden by his lap, moved over his phone. Devon caught it. Just a second of thumb movement, a subtle smirk. Something cold touched the back of his neck. Eleanor kept signing, oblivious to the tremor building across from her. Bradford leaned back, lips twitching with calculation. "She says," Devon continued, "we can adjust yield expectations to 10% over 5 years. It's sustainable." He hesitated. Bradford's phone chimed quietly once. The gray-haired man smiled as if tasting victory. "Bravo," Bradford said suddenly, interrupting. His voice cut through the air like static. "Truly inspiring. A janitor's son and a CEO's mother, saving the city. What a headline." Devon blinked. Eleanor froze mid-sign. "Doctor," Wilson frowned. "Bradford, what are you doing?" Bradford stood slowly, buttoning his jacket, eyes glittering. "What I always do, Catherine, verifying sources." He turned the screen toward them. A company profile pulled from the building's internal directory. Devon Martinez, age 10. Parent, Rosa Martinez, maintenance division. 6 years of service. He let the pause thicken. Touching, isn't it? A humble origin story. Except, he leaned forward. "This isn't a miracle. It's manipulation." "Excuse me, Doctor," Wilson said. Bradford gestured toward the door. Rosa still stood there, frozen, hands clutching her mop handle like a weapon she couldn't use. "Let's not pretend this is coincidence." The cleaning staff's son magically appears during a board meeting, fluent in ASL, interprets for the chairwoman. "No, this is choreography. Sympathy bait." He smirked. "A cheap performance to win favor." "Stop it," Devon said quietly, but Bradford was gaining rhythm, feeding off the silence. "You see, this is what happens when emotion replaces protocol. We let outsiders into confidential meetings. We let pity dictate votes. It's dangerous, unethical, and frankly grounds for dismissal." Bradford, Dr. Wilson began. He sliced the air with a hand. "No, I won't sit here and watch this charade. Mrs. Martinez," he said, turning toward Rosa, "you're fired. For misconduct and collusion, security, escort them out." The words hit harder than any slap. Devon felt the world tilt. Rosa's mouth opened, but no sound came. "Sir, please, I didn't." "Save it," Bradford snapped. 6 years of mopping floors, and this is how you repay the company, using your son as a prop? Shameful. The guards at the door shifted, uncertain. Devon stepped in front of his mother. "You can't do that," he said. His voice cracked once, then steadied. "You don't have the right." Bradford smiled thinly. "You're on private property." "Boy, I have every right." The room pulsed with unease. No one spoke. Even Richard looked away. Eleanor's hands rose slowly. Then she slammed them down on the table. The sound was like a thunderclap would against authority. Everyone jumped. Her signing came fast. Sharp, furious slashes of light cutting through air. Devon's heart hammered as he caught the first phrase. He straightened. His voice filled the silence. "She says, 'Enough.'" "Bradford." He looked directly at the man now. "She says, 'You're right. There is collusion, but not theirs. Yours.'" Bradford blinked. "Throne. What the hell does that mean?" Eleanor kept signing. Devon's voice grew stronger. "She says she reviewed the voting logs. Over the last 3 years, you voted no on every community housing project, 12 in total." He paused. The next sign stopped his breath. "And she says every one of those projects competed with Sterling Realty." Gasps spread like wind through the room. Bradford's jaw tightened. "That's absurd." "She says it's not," Devon continued. "She says you used her deafness to hide your conflicts of interest. You silenced her reports so you could profit." "Lies." Bradford's face flushed. "You have no proof." Eleanor raised a single finger. Devon nodded. "She says she does." From the folder beside her laptop, Eleanor slid out a printed document, neatly tabbed. She handed it to Dr. Wilson, who scanned the first page, then looked up. "Pal. These are cross-checks between board votes and Sterling Realty acquisitions," she whispered. "Dated. Timestamped. Notarized." Bradford took a step back. "You can't use stolen data." "It's not stolen," Dr. Wilson said coldly. "It's our internal audit. The one you buried." The room seemed to exhale. One of the guards by the door lowered his hand from his earpiece. Eleanor signed again. Devon translated without hesitation, voice steady as stone. She says, "Dr. Wilson, call the vote. Remove Bradford Sterling from the board immediately." Dr. Wilson looked around the table. All in favor. Hands rose, one after another. Opposed. None. Bradford's lips parted in disbelief. "You can't. This is illegal. I'll sue." "On what grounds?" Gregory Taylor asked dryly. "Conflict of interest. Perjury." Security moved not toward Rosa, but toward Bradford. He backed away, sputtering. "You'll regret this. All of you." Eleanor's hands flicked again. Devon didn't bother softening the words. "She says the only thing she regrets," he translated, "is letting you speak as long as you did." The guards took him by the arms. His phone clattered to the floor, screen still glowing with the incriminating directory search. The elevator doors closed behind him with a dull ding. And then silence. Eleanor turned to Dr. Wilson. Her signing was calm again. "Precise." Devon's throat tightened as he spoke for her. "She says, about the wager, $100,000. Send it to the Harlem Community Center. That's where I learned ASL." A ripple of quiet smiles broke around the table. Dr. Wilson nodded. "Consider it done." Rosa pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling. "Devon," he looked at her, the adrenaline finally draining from his limbs. "It's okay." "Mom," he whispered. Eleanor stood, walked around the table, and stopped in front of Rosa. Her hands moved slowly this time, each gesture gentle, deliberate. Devon blinked through a film of tears and translated. She says, "Mrs. Martinez, would you like a new job? Executive assistant, starting Monday." Rosa froze. "What?" Eleanor smiled. Devon laughed once, choked and bright. "She means it?" Rosa's knees nearly gave. She clutched the edge of the chair, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." Eleanor touched her shoulder. Then she turned to Devon and signed something small, soft, something only for him. Devon nodded, voice breaking. She says, "You did more than speak for me. You reminded them I still had a voice." Endo. The meeting dissolved in slow-motion, papers gathered, murmurs rising, the click of heels retreating. Devon stood near the window, looking out over the city. Below, the streets shimmered in the late afternoon heat, alive and loud, exactly the kind of sound Eleanor had learned to read through the movement of lips and hands. Rosa joined him. "You were brave," she said quietly. He shook his head. "She was brave. I just translated." Rosa smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "That's what heroes always say." Behind them, Eleanor packed her folder. She paused once, looking toward the empty chair where Bradford had sat. Her fingers twitched 3 small signs. Devon caught them through the glass reflection. "Truth has a price." He didn't translate it aloud. Some sentences were meant to stay between survivors. They walked out together, Eleanor, Rosa, and the boy who had turned silence into speech. As the elevator doors slid closed, Devon saw their reflections merge in the glass. 3 outlines against the skyline, steady and unbroken. By Wednesday, the whispers had made it to the cafeteria. Devon stood in line with a plastic tray and tried to pretend the 2 sixth graders at the juice cooler weren't staring. He could feel their eyes the way he could feel weather through a window pressure more than sound. On the monitors above the milk cartons, the school's closed-circuit news loop ran yesterday's announcements. Someone had muted it, but the captions crawled anyway. Community leaders, honor interpreters, a stock photo of clasped hands. Not him, not Eleanor. No names, and still it felt like the air had learned a new shape to press him into. "Yo, that's him," one of the kids whispered. "Notkie." The boardroom boy. Devon focused on the apples. His palm left a damp print on the tong. "Don't look up." He had learned how to be invisible before he learned his multiplication tables. It used to be easy, hoodie up, homework open, eyes down. Now stealth felt like a bad disguise. People wanted to be the first to say they'd seen him. A teacher he didn't know had called him young man like a medal. A hall monitor asked for a selfie, and then said sorry when Devon froze. "No pressure, kid. You're a hero." He said hero like he was handing over a backpack he wanted back by Friday. He took a seat at the far edge of a table and set his tray down gently so the fork wouldn't clatter. The cafeteria smelled like oranges, pizza cheese, and cleaner. One of the lunch ladies had painted a mural on the back wall hands, in every color spelling out, "I love you." He stared at that more than at the faces. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Mom. "How is school? Remember to finish reading log. Dinner 7. A second later, "New desk is very big. Too many buttons." He smiled, then wiped it away when he felt the room tilt toward him again. Devon, Ms. McKay, his homeroom teacher, approached with her quiet shoes and a tray holding coffee and a banana. She didn't sit until he nodded. She was good at that, asking permission without calling it that. "You want me to run interference?" she said lightly. "I can tell them you're in witness protection." He snorted. "I'm okay. You're allowed to be not okay," she said. "Both can be true." He picked at the edge of his napkin. "It's like I won something I didn't enter." "That happens," she said. "Sometimes the prize is heavy." She looked toward the mural. "You know, the painter over there. She's the one who taught me the alphabet. I practiced in my bathroom mirror for 2 weeks before I tried to talk to her. Still mess up R sometimes. She laughed at me in a nice way. He couldn't help it. His hand rose and he flicked an R off his chin. Quick and clean. R is easy. For you. Her mouth tucked into a smile. We all got different places we start from. Different places we're trying to get to. The bell bleated. The murmur lifted into chairs scraping. Ms. McKay pointed at his apple. Eat the fruit. It's a teacher law. Okay. And Devon. She waited until he looked up. You don't have to say yes to everything people want from you. That includes me. He nodded. The relief landed lower than expected. A small, warm thing that made him sleepy. In the hallway, a boy he knew from math held up both hands and signed clumsily. Hi Devon, I love you. Devon grinned and corrected the twist. Slow. A miniature lesson. Then kept moving. He could feel the rumor of him lagging behind like a kite. Rosa had never sat in a chair this expensive. It pushed back, silently, like a small luxury car. She didn't know how to drive. The Blackwood executive floor smelled like lemon and upholstery, and coffee beans ground somewhere out of sight. The elevator said ding in a voice so polite, she wanted to apologize to it for stepping on too fast. At 10, shwoo, her monitor pinged. At 10:20, a man with a tie that looked like money asked her to forward a file to legal. At 10:24, the coffee machine hissed at her in a language of blinking lights. The computer had 3 screens. Her hands wanted a mop. Eleanor's door was a cool rectangle of frosted glass. The name etched into it didn't need a title. Eleanor Blackwood. Rosa had dusted glass like this for 6 years, and never read her own reflection in any of it. Mrs. Martinez. A woman in a navy dress leaned over the partition with the smile everyone used when they weren't sure if you belonged. Could you join the 11 call? Take notes. Ms. Blackwood wants you to be in the loop. Of course, Rosa said, because of course was the safest answer in any room she didn't own. I will. She had never trusted a notebook more in her life. She wrote, loop equals circle equals important, in the margin, and underlined it twice. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Devon. I am okay. Lunch lady mural says, hi. She exhaled. Her shoulders dropped a half-inch. She looked down at the blouse Eleanor had insisted on buying her 2 days ago, white, soft. Not the uniform white from Block 14 supply closet. We will get you 2 of these, Eleanor had signed without asking. I require good shirts. The 11 came and went. Rosa typed like she was saving someone's life with every word. Afterward, a knock on the partition. Richard today, softer around the eyes, held up a paper cup like a peace offering. I know the machine is ridiculous, he said. There's a secret button. Don't tell Bradford. A half smile, then a wince. Old joke. Sorry. He set the cup by her keyboard. You're doing fine. I typed only what I heard, Rosa said. That's usually the only part worth keeping, he said. When he left, she took a sip and made a face. Expensive coffee had a bitter she wasn't used to. She looked at Eleanor's door. The silhouette inside moved, slow and sure, hands lifting and falling in conversation with the interpreter they'd scrambled to schedule same day, just in case Devon couldn't be pulled from school, just in case they needed to make this ordinary. At noon, Rosa stood and smoothed her skirt, and thought about going in and asking what in the loop meant. She thought about the sound of her own voice in that room, and how she didn't know its rules. She thought about the security guards who had walked Bradford out, and wondered how long a man like that stayed gone. Her phone buzzed again. Devon. Ms. McKay says, I can leave early if you need me. She typed, stay in school. I can do this. Then, After a minute, "But thank you." She pressed her palms flat on the desk. The laminate felt cool, like a fever test. She watched her hands. They didn't shake. Eleanor canceled her 3 o'clock and sent Richard home at 4. She waved off the car. It was a small act of stubbornness, but today it mattered. Drivers waited in quiet and treated you like a painting. The subway breathed and complained and reminded you that life was crowded and astonishing and shook the inside of your bones on the bad curves. She didn't take the subway. She took her own kind of carriage, a town car without the trick of distance. But she rolled the window down and let Harlem air flood in hot concrete, fried onion, old rain. In a manhole, the kind of summer smell that insisted on being remembered. The driver didn't look surprised when she motioned to stop a block early. "Here is good." She signed. He nodded like he always spoke fluent. The building had a stoop with 2 lives written on its steps: chalk, hopscotch, ghosts, and cigarette ash. A woman on the first-floor window unit rested her elbows on the sill and sang along to a radio. Her vowels slurred with heat. Kids yelled somewhere invisible. A dope bucket at nobody. On the 3rd floor, a radiator that hadn't been needed since April clanked like it was practicing. Rosa opened the door after 2 knocks, smiling with her whole face, and then smoothing it down like a bedspread. "Ms. Blackwood." She stepped back from the threshold. "Please come in. Please. It is not big." Eleanor's hand touched her forearm. A light press. "Beautiful." She signed. Rosa blinked, then opened the door wider. The Anderson apartment was the kind of tidy you only learn by living in very small spaces. Shoes lined up by the door like soldiers. A drying rack by the window with 3 T-shirts clipped. A drawing of a robot signed Alicia in shaky marker on the fridge. The table was set for 2 when it should have been for 3. Devon's backpack leaned like a tired person against a chair. He came out of the bedroom with a stack of library books and stopped, eyes flicking from Eleanor to his mother. "Hi." "Hi." Eleanor signed back. She did it slow and careful. "The way you hand a baby glass." He grinned. It was enough. Rosa fussed with a pot on the stove, clinking a spoon against its edge. "We have arrows and beans, if you like." Eleanor waved a thank you she could feel more than say. She did not sit at the table. She stood, watching the apartment with the kind of attention that makes people braver. She waited until Rosa's movements slowed to comfort, and Devon set the books down. Then she reached into her bag and brought out a small, worn notebook. The leather was cracked. The elastic had lost its give. She set it on the table like it carried both weight and something fragile. Devon looked at it like a magician's prop. "This was mine." Eleanor signed. Her hands moved with a softness that made time in the room change shape. "When I was 26, when I decided I would not be silent for other people's comfort." She tapped the cover. "I tried to teach Richard when he was small. I wrote down every sign I learned. Not good gloss, not perfect, but mine." Her mouth tilted at herself. "I made so many mistakes." Devon touched the edge with 2 fingers. "You kept it." She nodded. "Some days the only proof you did a hard thing is the paper you did it on." He opened it carefully. The first page had columns that made no sense to him until they did a scribble that said, "Intent" next to words, a diagram of a hand shape drawn like a leaf, a clumsy attempt at a classifier, corrected 3 times and circled. There were notes in the margins. Eye contact equals respect. Pause equals meaning. Listen harder. That last one underlined twice. Rosa leaned over the sink, watching without pretending not to. "Es muy bonito," she whispered. "Old. Good." Eleanor waited until Devon looked up again. Her hands said what her mouth couldn't. Winning in a room is easy, she signed. Staying worthy of winning is work. She slowed, letting the grammar fit the gravity. People will call you hero. That is a costume. Do not wear it too long, or it will wear you. She pointed toward the books. Read, practice, sleep, say no, say yes. Choose carefully. She breathed out, and when they stop listening, find a way to make them listen again without losing yourself. Devon swallowed. He wanted to say, I won't let you down. It felt too small and too much like homework. He signed, I will try, which was the truest thing he had. Then he added, I will practice. 3 hours. Every day. He hesitated, then grinned. Ms. Patricia would make me anyway. Eleanor's eyes warmed. She taught you well. She died, Devon said quietly. Last year, she wrote me a letter. I keep it in a shoebox. Eleanor nodded once. A kind of bow. Then we will make a better box. She signed. With shelves, Rosa cleared her throat and came to the table with bowls that steamed. She set one in front of Eleanor and then hovered, hands uncertain. I am scared, she said, the words spilling, as if they had been held behind her teeth too long. I am happy and proud and scared. She touched the new blouse at her shoulder. I don't know this world. I don't know if we belong in it. You saw what Bradford did. He can come back with lawyers. Eleanor didn't sit. She lifted her hand. The kitchen light fuzzed across her knuckles. Listen, she pointed to her own chest. When I was a girl, people said I should marry someone with ears. Her smile was nothing like amusement. I married no one. I married the work. It listened better than any man I met. She softened, a fraction, but I was never alone. You will not be either. She tapped the table. This is our world too, because we live in it. Rosa's mouth trembled. What if I make a mistake? You will. Eleanor signed. Then we will fix it. She pointed at the notebook. That is what this is. A book of mistakes that learned. Devon laughed. A small burst. It broke something tight in the room and let breath back in. They ate. The rice stuck to the spoon the way rice always does when the water was exactly right. The beans were perfect. Eleanor ate slowly, deliberately. She watched how Rosa relaxed when someone liked her food. Midway through the second bowl, Eleanor pointed to the refrigerator and signed Alicia. Devon nodded. She is with Tia. He finger-spelled appointment tomorrow. Eleanor signed, tell her I say brave. He signed that he would. After, Eleanor insisted on washing dishes with Rosa. They stood shoulder to shoulder at the sink, a choreography of passing and rinsing that required no language. Devon wiped the table, slower than necessary, because he didn't want the night to end the way. Good nights always end with someone leaving. Eleanor dried her hands and looked at him. Her eyes flicked toward the notebook. Keep it, she signed. I can't, he said. It's yours. It was mine. She signed. Now it is ours. She tapped it. You will add to it. A corner of her mouth lifted. Better handwriting. He held it like it might evaporate. Thank you. They walked her to the door. On the landing, the building's light flickered twice and steadied. Outside, a car horn talked to another car horn until they both sounded like laughter. Eleanor squeezed Rosa's hand, then Devon's shoulder, down on the sidewalk. The driver stepped out of the town car. Ms. Blackwood, he said, voice careful in the way people get when they have heard rumors of history. She nodded and reached for the handle. Her phone vibrated in her bag. She glanced at the screen and saw the name she paid to answer every time. Hart. SQ. She answered. The line fuzzed for a half-second and then snapped clear. She tilted the screen so Devon could see the name without reading the sound. Eleanor, Hart said, without hello. Sorry to bother you this late. She signed, go on. The driver waited with the patience of someone who understood that time changes around certain people There's a development, Hart said. Paper rustled on his end, a lawyer's shuffling, precise and ominous. Bradford filed a civil action this afternoon. Devon's throat went dry. He didn't know the words, but he knew the tone. What kind of action? Eleanor's voice was crisp, and even she let Hart do the hearing, claiming the boardroom footage that leaked constitutes unlawful recording, he said. He's arguing the video exploits a minor without consent, and that your reliance on it or any derivative transcript was improper. He's also floating a defamation angle. The street swallowed sound and spat it back as heat. Eleanor's brow knotted. Footage, she signed. Sharp. Which footage? The building's security feed, Hart said. The one that captured the meeting. Someone was going to leak it eventually. You knew that, but he's painting it as a child's privacy violation to muddy the water. He's banking on optics. Devon looked up at her, at the notebook under his arm, at the city that didn't care if you were a headline. For a second, the boardroom was back the table. The light, the way Bradford's smile pulled wrong at the edges. Hart continued, we're confident we can beat it, but it's going to get loud, faster than you wanted. Eleanor's hands stilled in the space between them, then moved again, slower, choosing each sign like a stone across a river. Okay, she told the air, and Hart, and the two people on the third-floor landing watching her face. Then we will listen harder. She ended the call. She looked at Devon and Rosa, and signed one more thing. A new line in a book that had room. Tomorrow, we begin again. By morning, the city had learned their names. Not all of them, just enough to feel like a crowd pressed against a window. Strangers, said Devon with a certainty no stranger should have, and Eleanor like a verdict. Headlines went long and short, earnest and cruel. Someone cut the boardroom footage into a 30-second package with dramatic strings and a red circle around the moment the boy's mouth moved. At 7:14 a.m., Rosa muted the television. The remote made a soft click that felt like closing a door you didn't own. Finish your toast, she said. Her voice pretended to be ordinary. Butter cooled on a slice of pan too pale to be appetizing. Devon stared at the screen even though it had gone dark. They could still hear the building, the neighbor's kettle, the steam radiator clank, the hallway laughter swallowing a joke before it finished. Mom, he asked, are we in trouble? Rosa folded a dish towel, unfolded it, folded it again. No, she said, because she wanted it to be true. We are in a story. Stories make noise. Devon nodded like there was a right answer. His backpack waited by the door, zipper mouth shut too tight. The notebook Eleanor had given him sat on the table, elastic looped twice to keep it from opening on its own. Eat, Rosa said again, softer. He took a bite big enough to be proof and small enough to be a promise. The phone vibrated on the table. Rosa Martinez glowed with a call from a number that read, Blackwood Prive. Rosa pressed accept and put it on speaker because she had learned in 2 days that some conversations had to be heard by more than one person. Good morning, Hart said. Even through the tinny speaker, the lawyer's voice sounded like paper stacked straight. We're filing to dismiss. Bradford's complaint is mostly theater unlawful recording. Won't stick when the footage is from the building's own security system and you're a party to the meeting, but he'll run the optics. Today will be loud. Louder than last night, Rosa said. Loud worse, Hart said. He's booked the morning shows. He's coming as concerned about a child being exploited by a billionaire. It's a clean angle. Ugly, but clean. Devon felt the word child like a weight he had to carry without dropping. I don't want him on TV, Rosa said. My son. Understood, Hart said. We will not make him available. Eleanor agrees. Eleanor, Devon asked before he could stop himself. She's already at the office. Hart said. She'd like you both to come by later. Quietly. We're going to talk strategy. It won't be like a show. Rosa looked at the clock. After school, she said. We go together. Hart's breath scratched the line for a second. Then smooth. Together, he said. That is the word. At 8. Ling Si. Eleanor stood in front of the wall of glass and watched the city try to think. Clouds moved like an argument across Midtown. The river held its line. She signed to herself when she was alone, habit more than need. Small, efficient movements that put the morning where it belonged. Richard arrived with a tablet and a face that looked like he'd slept under a desk. Hart's downstairs. He said. He brought folders. Hart. Eleanor signed. And Catherine, Dr. Wilson is on her way. Richard said. He hesitated. Mom, you sure about keeping Devon out of this? The press is asking for the boy. They want the duo. Eleanor's eyes hardened, then softened. He is not a duet, she signed. He is a child with homework. She tilted her head toward the river. Do not feed a river your bone. Richard exhaled a laugh that didn't make it to his eyes. Copy that. Hart stepped in carrying 3 Redwelds and the aura of a newsroom that never ended. Dr. Wilson followed with a phone already buzzing in her palm. Morning, she said briskly. I've had 2 donors ask if we're exploiting a minor. One of them spelled exploiting wrong in the email and still wants a moral receipt. Bradford's publicist has earned his money. Hart placed the folders like bricks. First, front, he said, tapping 1, legal. We move to strike the TRO. Bradford's filed to block use of the video and any derivative materials in corporate actions. It's nonsense, but it buys him time and headlines. The footage is ours, security footage from our building, recorded on our system of our meeting. Consent is implied. There's no exploitation when the boy wasn't filmed for broadcast, and the leak did not originate from us. He glanced at Eleanor, measuring. Which brings me to chain of custody. Eleanor nodded once. The leak was authorized. She signed. By me. Her mouth tightened at his expression. Don't pretend this is a surprise. Truth rots in drawers. Hart didn't flinch. I'm not surprised. I'm planning. He tapped the second folder. Second front. Communications. We lead with process, not people. We emphasize interpreter access, board transparency, and policy changes. No interviews with Devon. No exceptions. Rosa is off limits. Dr. Wilson pocketed her phone. We can put an ASL interpreter on every video we release, she said, and make that the story, access, and inclusion. Good, Hart said. We need a narrative people can hold without thinking too hard. He slid the 3rd folder toward Eleanor. There's an affidavit for you to sign about the origin of the audit materials, and a line about why you empowered an interpreter in the room. It reads as policy, not child prodigy. Because it was, Eleanor signed. Then, smaller, because it should have been years ago. Richard cleared his throat. What about Bradford? Hart's mouth flattened. He'll say you orchestrated a spectacle. He'll say Eleanor used a vulnerable child to manipulate a vote. He'll put his hand on his heart for the cameras, and he'll look like the adult, so we look more adult. Dr. Wilson said, we stay calm, we build the scaffolding, and we accept the day will be bad. Hart said, some days are. Our job is not to let it turn into a week. Eleanor's eyes went to the glass again. Rosa and Devon come today. She signed, I will tell the boy to say no. Good, Hart said. Protect him now so he can fight later. School spilled out like a pocket knocked open. Backpacks bumped. Laughter clattered. Sneakers squeaked through a puddle left by a janitor's cautious mop. Devon waited by the iron gate because Ms. McKay had told him to. She stood with him like the edge of a safe zone. Reporter Vance, she said, glancing toward the street. Blue boxes with antennas grew like mushrooms whenever weather or scandal happened. A woman in a bright blazer pretended to talk to her own reflection in a camera lens. A man checked his hair in a side mirror. The microphones looked like new teeth. "We can go out the side." "Ms." McKay offered, "Less theater. I have to meet my mom." Devon said, "Front." She nodded. "Then I'm your small, unimpressive bouncer." They stepped through the gate. The air snapped with the sound of shutters. A woman called, "Devon." Just one question, and then three, then 10. "How did it feel? Do you regret? Are you aware of? Is it true?" Rosa appeared like a sudden door, arms wide, ushering him past the microphones with a hand on his shoulder. "No, thank you," she said, calm and hard. "No, thank you," a voice shouted. "Do you think Ms. Blackwood used your son?" And another. "Is it true the boy's father?" Rosa didn't stop or look. A shove of bodies, and then the sidewalk opened, and then they were in a cab that smelled like pine and old fries. And Rosa's hand was shaking in her lap even though her voice wasn't. "I hate it," she said, so quiet it was almost a thought. "I know," he said. The driver raised his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Wild day," he said, the way people said rain when they were soaked. He kept his mouth closed after that, which was the kindest thing he could have done. Back at Blackwood, the lobby's marble floor amplified footsteps like applause. Security guards who had walked Bradford out 2 days ago nodded at Rosa like the building had decided she belonged. The elevator's polite ding arrived with a camera flash from across the street. The doors slid shut on it. Inside Eleanor's office, the light was softer. The interpreter sat ready on a simple chair, hands resting, waiting for work that wasn't performance. Hart stood by the window with a stack of statements. Dr. Wilson leaned against the credenza like she'd been born in boardrooms. Eleanor stepped forward first. She signed "Thank you" to Rosa and "Welcome" to Devon, and something that wasn't a sign so much as a shape made with both hands. A gesture that meant, "We're in this side by side." Hart started with logistics. "They'll ask for your comment," he said to Devon. "We'll give them mine. You're not the story. You're a person." Devon nodded. The relief was not as large as he'd expected. Weight behaved badly around hope. It redistributed, hid in corners. Dr. Wilson handled the second front. "We've recorded a statement," she said, ASL and closed captioned. "Eleanor, me, and Richard on camera. Policy, not people. We've got a slate of community partners ready to amplify. This will trend, but we can trend back." Eleanor signed something that made Hart's pen pause. "We will not apologize for the boy." Her jaw tightened. "We will apologize for waiting 3 years to hear me." "Put that in, Dr." Wilson said without looking at Hart, verbatim. Hart sighed like a man who knew when he was outnumbered by a better idea. "Fine," he said, "but no referencing the video. Bradford's TRO is a hook. Don't give him rope." Rosa raised her hand halfway, then all the way. "What if they come to the building again?" she asked. "To my desk." "Facilities will escort you," Richard said. He'd been quiet, but now he stepped closer. "And we'll badge the elevators. This isn't a circus. It's a workplace." A phone vibrated. Everyone's eyes went to their own first, like gamblers protecting cards. It was Hart's. He read, and his face did the thing people's faces do when something they predicted still manages to surprise them. "He did it," he said. "He booked Morning Desk and City Focus. Both segments." "Which angle?" Dr. Wilson asked, though she knew. "Child exploitation," Hart said, "and boardroom bullying. He's got an attorney beside him who specializes in media harm to minors." Enders. Rosa's hand found the back of a chair. "That is a lie," she said. "He is lying." "Yes." Hart said. But it's a cultivated lie. People like to eat the kind that makes them feel virtuous. Eleanor's hands rose. Deliberate. Then we will feed them better food. Hart smiled. Brief and real. Let's plate it. At 5:02 p.m., Devon sat in the corner of Eleanor's office and watched a city he couldn't see talk about him in boxes. One screen showed a cheerful set with mugs, another offered muted headlines in angry fonts. Eleanor refused to turn the sound on until the closed captions appeared. The interpreter waited, but there was nothing in that moment to interpret. Francis, the driver, had brought up hot chocolate for Devon and tea for Rosa. Both went cold on the coaster. On morning desk, Bradford wore empathy like a well-tailored suit. The captioners kept up, deeply concerned about a child, never about me. Always about his welfare, disturbing to watch a billionaire. The host nodded at the appropriate places, the way you nod at funerals when you didn't know the deceased. On City Focus, the attorney beside him adjusted her glasses for outrage. Minors have heightened privacy interests. Power imbalance, corporate manipulation. She said, manipulation, like a word she'd been waiting to pronounce all week. Eleanor's release dropped at 5. Sherwoo. The frame was simple. No music, no graphics, just Eleanor, Dr. Wilson, and Richard at a table. An interpreter in a clean box. A caption bar that didn't try to shout, "We failed to listen. We will not fail again. We commit to interpreter access in every meeting. We commit to deaf and hard of hearing hiring." It didn't mention the boy. It didn't need to. For 15 minutes. The comments trended toward decency. A teacher in Queens posted a video of her class learning, "Thank you." A clinic in the Bronx offered to staff the future health center. Someone cut a clip of Eleanor signing, "We failed," and captioned it, "Real accountability." And the word real meant something for once. At 5, Sushasan, the air shifted. A new clip hit the feeds. It was cut from the same boardroom footage, but reframed. The editor slowed and zoomed on Devon's face, blurred Eleanor's hands into a frantic blur, and overlaid one line of Bradford's interview. It broke my heart to see a child put in that position. The caption on the clip read, "Protect him." The account that posted it had a blue check mark and a bio full of words like advocate and family and truth. The numbers rolled like a slot machine that only knew one symbol. Hearts and broken hearts. Anger faces. Shares. By 6. Sure. A city council member tweeted a call for an inquiry into the use of minors in corporate proceedings. By 6. Sure. An advocacy blog that had never met a nuance. It didn't flatten. Published, "7 reasons this is not okay." At 6, Sancheryi, a national morning show posted a teaser. "Tomorrow, is this boy wonder being used?" The thumbnail was Devon's mouth mid-syllable. The blur made him look guilty. In the office, the monitors made no sound, and still the room felt loud. Rosa stood. "Turn it off," she said. "Please." Her hands worried the hem of her blouse until the thread gave, This is not right." Hart fielded 3 calls in a row. He said understood 4 times, and no comment 5. Dr. Wilson wrote an op-ed with the speed of a woman who had learned to fight fires with sentences. Richard paced, then stopped pacing because the floor should not have to hold his panic. Eleanor didn't move until Hart lowered his phone and met her eyes. "They're calling for an injunction," he said. "Not just against the video, against you. They're framing this as child endangerment. They want child services to look in." Rosa put a hand to her mouth. "No," she said into her palm, as if she could catch the sound before the room heard it. "No, No. Devon felt it as a tilt again, the way floors can be level and still not feel safe. He pressed his palm to the notebook on his lap until the elastic cut his skin a little. He signaled without standing small movements. For Eleanor alone. I can talk. I can say it was my idea. I can say. Eleanor lifted a hand and stopped him with a look that was not a command so much as a shelter. You will say nothing tonight. She signed. You will sleep. That will be our rebellion. He swallowed hard and nodded because she had asked him for the hardest thing he knew how to do. Hart's phone lit up again. He didn't answer it this time. We need a counterpunch, he said. Not tomorrow. Now, Doctor. Wilson capped her pen. Not the boy, she said, to herself as much as to the room. Never the boy. A ping came from the corner. The building's social monitoring dashboard projected onto the second screen. The sentiment line dropped below a red threshold and kept digging, a graph becoming a hole. Protect the child overtook listen in ASL. The comments turned into scolds and then into knives. Okay, Richard said, as if he could muscle the world into a better decision with one word. We pivot. We pull the statement into local TV. We go live with the commitments. We invite the union. No, Eleanor signed. We do nothing for 1 hour. She held up a finger, then curled it into her palm. We watch who we are when they hate us. Rosa looked like she didn't have enough air. Devon's mouth had gone dry. Hart opened his palm and then closed it again. A man measuring his own patience against urgency. The hour didn't need the whole 60 minutes to make its point. At 6, Wushaba. The board's group thread flashed on Richard's tablet. A sponsor had paused funding pending review. A second followed. At 7, Ling San, a city liaison, texted Dr. Wilson. We'll need to revisit zoning support. Optics tough. At 7, Ling Zhou. The elevator dinged too cheerfully for the moment, and no one got off. Reversal, Hart said softly, a courtroom word that belonged to a different kind of drama. He took the narrative in 2 moves. Eleanor nodded once. She didn't blink. The river beyond the glass was all steel now, dusk bruising its edges. Rosa reached for Devon's hand and squeezed until their knuckles went white together. We can go home, she said. We don't need. We need you, Doctor, Wilson said, and then stopped herself. We need you safe more. Eleanor turned from the window. The interpreter sat still, hands quiet, in her lap. Ready. Eleanor signed in a way that felt like the start of something and the end of something else. Tomorrow, I will speak to them, all of them. Without him, she tilted her head toward Devon. They will not use his mouth against him. Hart nodded. Press conference, he said. New questions, questions. Eleanor signed. Her eyes sparked the way dry bark sparks when it finally catches. But I will choose them. He almost smiled. You're going to make my job very hard. Good, she signed. The lights in the office hummed their polite hum. Somewhere, a copier woke and decided to nap again. The city kept doing what cities do, eating, yawning, changing its mind. Devon looked at the notebook in his lap and then at Eleanor's hands and then at the second screen where his face had been turned into a symbol he didn't agree to be. I don't like their story, he said. Eleanor nodded. Then we will write another. Hart's phone lit one more time. He glanced down, and his mouth thinned. Update, he said. A judge granted Bradford's TRO temporary restraining order. We are barred from using the boardroom video in any official capacity until a hearing next week. Media is spinning it as a win for protecting a child. Silence held, not empty, but packed tight. Outside the glass, a helicopter crossed the river, its rotors a faint thrum. Devon felt the vibration come up through the floor like a warning. Okay, Doctor, Wilson said, forced bright like a light bulb, turning on despite the storm. Fine, let him have today. Eleanor's fingers shaped 3 crisp signs, each one a promise she didn't owe the room but gave anyway. Tomorrow, she signed, we take it back. The night before the press conference, rain finally came. Not the polite drizzle Manhattan used to wash its face, but real rain sideways, stubborn, drumming on every metal surface like it wanted in. Eleanor didn't sleep. She read, not briefs, not statements, but the kind of notes she used to take in grad school, when the world was still quiet enough for ideas. On the desk beside her sat Devon's notebook, open to a blank page. She wrote in clean block letters, "When they twist your words, build a bridge of your own sentences." She underlined your own. Then, for the first time in 2 days, she smiled. By dawn, the building's entrance looked like a barricade made of umbrellas and microphones. Reporters waited in neat chaos, cords and coffee cups tangled around their feet. Security taped off the steps. Inside, Hart paced with 2 phones and half a bagel. "Live stream begins in 90 seconds, he said. "Sounds clean." Interpreters tested. "Dr. Wilson's already on standby for follow-up interviews. The mayor's office is pretending neutrality, which is good. They're scared of the optics." Eleanor adjusted her jacket. Black, simple, no jewelry. Power dressed down, Rosa stood near the wall, hands clasped like she was holding something breakable. Devon sat beside her, hood up, trying to vanish into the chair. "You don't have to watch," Eleanor told him through sign. He shook his head. "I want to. You will hear things." She signed, "Not all true." "I know," he replied. "But they're talking about us anyway." She hesitated, then touched his shoulder, a gesture halfway between apology and pride. Hart lifted his chin. "We're live." Cameras blinked like an impatient constellation. Eleanor stepped to the podium. The interpreter stood to her left, steady as a shadow. Behind them, the Blackwood emblem gleamed faintly on a gray backdrop. Eleanor signed first, letting the interpreter trail her words with measured precision. "Good morning. My name is Eleanor Blackwood. I am here because stories, when left unattended, grow teeth." The room stilled. She continued, "A child helped me speak in a language I should have learned decades ago. That child is not a weapon. He is not a scandal. He is a reminder." She paused to let the interpreter finish, then looked directly into the nearest lens. We all saw a moment of clarity and mistook it for a show. I take responsibility for every silence that made that moment necessary, but I will not apologize for the truth that came with it. A murmur rippled through the crowd, reporters checking notes, exchanging looks. Today, I reaffirm the commitments we made. Full interpreter access in every boardroom, full transparency in every project, and protections for any employee, janitor, or executive who speaks up. She signed the next part more slowly, the motion deliberate, personal, and I ask that you stop speaking about Devon Martinez. Speak instead about what he made possible. When she finished, she stepped back, hands lowering into stillness. The first question came fast, cutting through the quiet. "Ms. Blackwood, are you confirming that you leaked the footage yourself?" Hart bristled, but Eleanor didn't flinch. She nodded once. "Yes, because I refuse to live in a world where integrity depends on who holds the microphone." A second voice shouted, "Do you worry about losing your position?" "I worry about keeping it if I start lying." The flashes surged. Hart's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down. Eleanor speaks, climbing up the trend line again. This time tinted blue, not red. While adults fought with headlines, Devon sat in the counselor's office. Miss McKay had pulled him out of math under the pretense of checking in. The rain clattered against the window. "Your mom called," she said. "She's at work, but she wanted me to tell you she's proud." Devon looked at the muted TV in the corner. Eleanor was mid-sentence, hand raised like a blade. "She's brave," he said. "So are you, Ms." McKay replied. "Even when you're quiet." He traced the edge of his notebook. On the first page, Eleanor's handwriting looked both fierce and tired. "Build a bridge of your own sentences." He flipped to a new page and began to draw not words, not hands, but shapes, lines connecting faces, arrows looping between ears and eyes, communication as circuitry. When he was done, it looked like a city made of listening. Across town, Bradford watched the same press conference from a private club that charged more for water than most people paid for rent. His lawyer, a man named Crane, scrolled through comments with a frown that deepened with each refresh. "They're buying it," Crane said. Sentiment flipped within 20 minutes. "She's untouchable again." Bradford's jaw tightened. "No one's untouchable. We'll reframe it, unless you want to look desperate." Crane warned. "Public sympathy's shifting. We can drag the case out, but the court of opinion is closing." Bradford poured himself another drink. The ice cracked like an argument ending badly. "Then we move it somewhere colder." Crane looked up. "Meaning federal," Bradford said. "Privacy and commerce. If she used internal security footage for gain, it's theft. We'll force discovery, make them drown in their own evidence." Crane hesitated. "You'll burn everything." Bradford smiled thinly. "Exactly." That evening, back in Harlem, Rosa cooked without measuring. The smell of garlic filled the apartment. The sound of rain softened into rhythm. Devon read aloud from a schoolbook, stumbling on a word until she corrected him gently. On the table, his phone buzzed with a new notification. Eleanor Blackwood statement, full transcript. He tapped it open, scrolling until he found the line that mattered. "We all saw a moment of clarity and mistook it for a show." He copied it into his notebook beneath his drawing. Then, with slow, careful motion, he added one more sentence in his own handwriting. "The show was never the point. Listening was." Rosa watched him, drying her hands on a towel. "What are you writing?" "Homework," he said, smiling. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far off, but they weren't coming closer. For once, the city seemed to be catching its breath. In the penthouse office, Hart closed his laptop with a rare sense of relief. "We bought ourselves time," he said. "Tomorrow, headlines will be about policy, not scandal." Eleanor looked out at the skyline, where rain still traced silver paths down the glass. "Time," she signed, "is only borrowed." Her phone lit up again. A new email subject line: "Federal notice of investigation, privacy inquiry." Hart read it over her shoulder. "Bradford's going nuclear," he murmured. Eleanor's hands stilled over the desk. Then, calm as a metronome, she signed, "Then we answer louder." Hart frowned. "Meaning, we show them the file he's afraid of." She replied, "The one he buried under Sterling Realty." Hart blinked. "You have it." Eleanor nodded once. "Tomorrow." The thunder rolled again. Closer this time. Devon sat by the window, watching water thread down the glass. He lifted his hand, tracing patterns that turned into signs only he understood, half words, half hope. Behind him, Rosa hummed an old lullaby she hadn't sung in years. Across the city, Eleanor opened a locked drawer, pulled out a drive no one else knew existed, and set it beside her notebook. Rain softened, then stopped. The hum of the city returned. Devon looked up from the window and whispered, "Tomorrow." Eleanor, miles away, whispered the same word into the silence. "Tomorrow." And the echo carried through glass, through storm, through every frequency that refused to stay quiet. The city had dried overnight, but tension never does. Morning light hit the mirrored towers like a warning, too bright, too clean, exposing every fingerprint the storm hadn't washed away. Hart was waiting in Eleanor's office when she arrived. No small talk this time. He just slid a thin folder across her desk. Federal Subpoena, he said. Issued at midnight. They want the original video, communication logs, and all internal correspondence regarding Sterling Realty. Eleanor scanned the header. The seal looked like a threat, pretending to be polite. Bradford's fingerprints are all over it. Hart continued. He's using the Federal Privacy Act as a crowbar. If they find evidence of data misuse or unauthorized disclosure, we could be looking at corporate penalties. Maybe personal. Eleanor didn't blink. Personal means me. Hart nodded. And possibly Devon. If they claim he distributed it, she looked up sharply. He's a child. That's the point, Hart said. Bradford's strategy is to make the government his megaphone. Protect the boy. They'll say, it's the same story. Now with subpoenas. Eleanor turned to the window. Below, the plaza shimmered with traffic and screens and noise. Then we give them something they can't spin. She signed, proof. Hart hesitated. You mean the drive? Yes. He rubbed his temples. If we unseal that file, we're not just fighting Bradford anymore. We're exposing every project he touched half the city council. Maybe more. That's nuclear. Eleanor's reply was simple. So is silence. Rosa was ironing a shirt she couldn't afford to wrinkle. Her new office badge lay beside the iron, glossy as a metal, and twice as heavy. Devon sat at the table, sketching in the notebook again, buildings. This time, interlaced with wires. He had drawn Eleanor at her desk, tiny next to a tower of folders. Mom, he asked, what's federal mean? Rosa paused, pressing the iron flat. It means big. It means people who don't knock when they come in. He frowned. Is it bad? Not yet, she said. But people like Bradford, they have long arm. You keep your head down at school today. Okay. He nodded but didn't promise. The TV was off, but the world still leaked through. The buzz of a neighbor's radio. The headline someone read out loud in the hallway. Blackwood, under investigation. Rosa shut the window. Breakfast first, she said, because that was something she could still control. Eleanor unlocked the drawer. The hard drive was matte black, unmarked. It held 7 years of internal audits and property transfers. Sterling Realty's shadow map of influence. She plugged it in. The screen flickered to life folders, encrypted logs, a cascade of data that looked like static until you knew what to search for. Hart leaned over her shoulder. Where did this come from? An internal audit, she said. 2 years ago. I ordered it after noticing anomalies in the Bronx redevelopment bids. Bradford buried it when I lost my hearing. Claimed the auditors overstepped. Hart exhaled slowly. So he's been laundering contracts through shell LLCs and bribing board members with kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. Her fingers hesitated before signing the last word. If we release this, the Justice Department will eat it alive. He stared at her. You realize they could claim you withheld evidence. Eleanor met his gaze. Or they could thank me for preserving it. Hart didn't know whether to be impressed or terrified. Dr. Wilson read the headlines on her tablet. The board split. Half want to suspend operations until the investigation clears. The other half want to distance from you completely. Eleanor signed without flinching. Let them choose their kind of silence. Bradford sat in makeup, rehearsing lines. The host across from him smiled like a blade. Ready to talk accountability? She asked. Always, Bradford said smoothly. Someone has to protect the integrity of our institutions. And our children. His phone buzzed with a text. Federal Subpoena served. Phase 2 complete. He smiled wider. Cameras rolled. At 2:16 p.m., a file labeled Sterling Subsidiaries Confidential zip appeared in an anonymous email to 3 major journalists. Attached was a single line. Ask him where the money went. No one knew who sent it. But by 4, Ling Sterling Files was trending above Protect the Child. Charts, bank routes, offshore entities. Bradford's name appeared in 12 separate shell companies tied to overbilled construction contracts. Hart slammed his laptop shut. That wasn't us, right? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Would it matter if it was? Legally, he said. Absolutely. Morally. Hart sighed. You win that one. By evening, reporters camped outside Bradford's townhouse. The same cameras that had painted him a martyr now demanded answers. A new headline crawled across every screen. Sterling Realty under federal fraud probe. Dr. Wilson leaned into Eleanor's doorway. Congratulations, she said dryly. You just turned the hunter into the hunted. Eleanor signed. Truth is contagious. But even as she said it, the fatigue crept into her shoulders. Battles have a way of multiplying faster than victories. In Harlem, Rosa received a call from Human Resources. Routine verification, the voice said. We're reviewing documentation for employees connected to the Blackwood inquiry. Rosa's hand tightened on the phone. I'm not part of the inquiry, she said. Of course, the voice replied, too politely, but we need to confirm your authorization for certain files. There's mention of your name in an old payroll ledger under Sterling's maintenance accounts. She went still. My name? Yes. 2018. Did you ever work any temporary contracts through Sterling Realty? No, she said. Never. But after the call, she opened her old pay stubs and saw it. Employer of record, Sterling Facility Services. A subcontractor under Sterling Realty. Her stomach dropped. She had cleaned their offices for months without realizing who owned them. Now Bradford could claim conflict of interest, say the Martinez family had a financial tie to him all along. The phone rang again. Unknown number. She didn't answer. Eleanor sat in the dark, the city's hum pressing against the glass. Devon's drawing was still pinned to her wall, a network of lines connecting people like a map of empathy. Hart entered quietly. We've got a problem, he said, setting down a printout. Sterling's lawyers are filing a motion to disqualify Rosa as your assistant. They're saying she was a former employee under a Sterling subsidiary. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. They're reaching? Yes, Hart said, but it muddies the water. Bradford's narrative. The janitor's family who staged a coup for profit. It'll spread by morning. She signed slowly. Then we end it before morning. He frowned. How? Eleanor turned the monitor toward him. On screen. A single line of code blinked in a secure upload window. Evidence archive. Sterling routing logs. She began typing. Released to Department of Justice. CC. Press pool unredacted. Hart's breath caught. Eleanor. That's irreversible. So is corruption. He watched as she pressed enter. The progress bar filled like dawn coming up too fast. By midnight, every outlet had the data. Wire transfers, offshore accounts, whistleblower affidavits. The scandal exploded. Bradford's lawyer resigned. Federal agents raided Sterling Realty's offices at dawn. Cameras swarmed like gulls. But victory never feels clean. By 8 a.m., Eleanor's board issued a statement, effective immediately. Ms. Blackwood will step aside pending review. They called it procedural. It wasn't. It was politics. Hart read it out loud, voice flat. They needed a sacrifice. You were too visible. Eleanor only nodded. Sometimes truth costs a job. Sometimes it buys a future. Rosa found Eleanor on the rooftop terrace that afternoon, wind tugging at her coat. I heard, Rosa said softly. Eleanor smiled faintly. Freedom often comes disguised as exile. Rosa hesitated. I don't know what happens now. Eleanor pointed toward the skyline. Now, the city listens differently. Down below, protesters gathered not against them, but for them, deaf students held signs in ASL. Listen with your eyes. Devon stood among them, notebook clutched tight, his voice joining the hum of the crowd. When Eleanor looked down and saw him, she signed across the distance, slow and clear. Your turn. Devon smiled and lifted his hands. Thank you. He signed back. Night fell. The skyline pulsed with screens repeating one headline: Bradford Sterling arrested on fraud and bribery charges. Somewhere in a quiet apartment, Rosa turned off the TV. Devon drew a new sketch. 3 hands interlocked, one old, one young, one steady. Beneath it, he wrote, Truth speaks in every language. He tore the page from the notebook and taped it to the window. Across the city, in the reflection of her own glass tower, Eleanor saw it glimmer. For the first time in weeks, she closed her eyes and heard silence, not the absence of sound, but its opposite, the sound of being understood. The city moved on, as it always did, but not for Eleanor. A week after the board's decision, her name had slipped from headlines to op-eds, then to think pieces about accountability culture. The public no longer argued whether she was right or wrong. They debated what she symbolized. That was how New York buried you, not with silence, but with essays. Eleanor watched from across the street as security peeled her name from the brass directory. The letters BLACKWOOD came off one by one, small metallic sighs swallowed by rain. Hart stood beside her, umbrella tilted awkwardly. You don't have to stay for this. She signed. I built that building. I should see what's left. Hart's mouth tightened. The Department of Justice confirmed the charges against Sterling. Bradford's plea hearing is next month. You won, Eleanor. Then why does it feel like loss? Because it is, he said quietly. Winning and losing just happen at different speeds. She almost smiled. Then she handed him a sealed envelope. For the board, my resignation in writing. Make sure they read it. Hart frowned. It's already over. Exactly. Now it's clean. He nodded, slipped the envelope inside his coat. What will you do? Listen. She signed, for once, without an agenda. Rosa's new office was smaller than Eleanor's kitchen, but it had a window, and that was more than she'd ever expected. She wiped down the desk twice before sitting, as if afraid the opportunity itself might leave smudges. Devon waited outside the glass wall, backpack in his lap, watching her smile to herself in disbelief. A coworker leaned over the cubicle. You're the Martinez from the video. Right. Rosa froze. The woman grinned. My niece learned sign because of you two. Said she wants to be an interpreter someday. Something in Rosa's shoulders eased. Tell her she should, she said. It changes more than language. When Devon looked up at her through the glass, she mouthed, We're okay now. He nodded, but he wasn't sure she was right. That evening, a courier brought a small package to their apartment. No return label, just a familiar handwriting on the envelope. E.B. Inside was a fountain pen, a sheet of heavy stationery, and a short letter written in the crisp rhythm of Eleanor's voice. Dear Devon, sometimes truth will thank you with silence instead of applause. Don't mistake one for punishment. The city has a long memory and a short attention span. You can't control which part you become. Keep learning. Keep signing. The rest will find you. E. At the bottom, a second note, smaller, for Rosa. There's a place that needs cleaning more than any office city records. They'll call you next week. You'll find something there worth your time. Rosa folded the letter carefully, like a contract, written in trust. The following Monday, Rosa stood in the basement archive of the municipal building, surrounded by towers of dusty boxes. She was supposed to inventory files slated for digital transfer. But one box was different. Urban development, Bronx corridor, Sterling Holdings. She opened it. Inside were original blueprints, payment ledger, inspection memo, dozens of signatures, one of them not Bradford's. Eleanor, she whispered, recognizing the neat initials on the audit line. E.B. 2018. She dialed Hart immediately. Hart arrived an hour later, trench coat dripping from the rain. "What am I looking at?" he asked. Rosa pointed to a single line on the ledger. Reimbursement to Sterling Realty via city infrastructure. Grant authorized by Deputy Director M. Klein. Klein, Hart muttered, the man who greenlit every one of Bradford's bids. "Can we prove it?" Rosa asked. Hart's eyes lit. "If these documents are authentic, this isn't just fraud. It's conspiracy across departments." He straightened, energized. "You realize what this means?" Rosa nodded. That Eleanor's exile wasn't the end. Hart found Eleanor that night at a small cafe in the Lower East Side. She was reading lips across the counter, signing slowly to a barista who was learning. When Hart laid the folder on her table, she didn't touch it immediately. "I said I was done." "You are," he said, "but history isn't." She opened the folder, scanned the pages. Her fingers paused halfway through the ledger, tapping twice on the deputy's name, M. Klein, City Oversight Chair. Hart said, "He buried Sterling's contracts after you were pushed out. He's still in office." Eleanor leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Then truth isn't finished talking." Later, she walked along the East River, the city's noise dissolving into water. Her phone buzzed Rosa. "Ms. Blackwood," Rosa said, her voice steady but urgent. "Hart told me. You can't stop now. The city needs to see this." Eleanor's fingers hovered over the phone. Then she smiled faintly. "No," she said aloud. Her first spoken word in months, voice rough but clear. "We can't stop now." The next morning, Dr. Wilson convened a closed meeting of community leaders and journalists. Eleanor arrived quietly, file in hand. No title, no company, just the truth. She laid the documents on the table. Sterling wasn't acting alone, she said through her interpreter. He was the symptom. Here's the disease. Flashes exploded. Hart stood behind her like a wall. "Doctor," Wilson leaned forward, "you realize this reopens every city contract from the last decade." "Yes," Eleanor signed. "That's why I came back." By nightfall, City Hall was in chaos. The mayor's press secretary issued a bland denial. Klein went on leave. But the public wasn't fooled. Protesters gathered outside City Hall with signs that read, "Listen first, then clean." News anchors replayed Eleanor's line. Sterling was the symptom. Here's the disease. The same words that had once exiled her now brought her back. 2 weeks later, in a classroom uptown, Devon gave a presentation titled, "The Language of Justice." He stood before a room of students, some signing, some speaking, all listening. "Sign language isn't about silence," he said. "It's about precision, about saying exactly what you mean, even if the world has to slow down to hear you." Eleanor sat in the back, anonymous in the crowd, Rosa beside her, smiling. When the applause came, it wasn't thunderous, it was steady, rhythmic, like rain returning after a dry season. That night, Eleanor returned to her old office building. Her name was gone from the wall, but someone, maybe a janitor, maybe no one at all, had traced new letters in dust across the brass. E.B. listened. She touched it once, a blessing, then turned away. Above the city, lights blinked like Morse code. A language built from absence and persistence. Eleanor smiled to herself. Exile, she thought, was just another word for beginning. Rain hadn't stopped since the press conference. It streaked down the office windows like ink bleeding through thin paper, smearing the skyline into shades of gray. Inside the 12th floor suite, the air still carried adrenaline. Files lay open, coffee gone cold, a dozen headlines flashing across Hart's laptop screen. Blackwood returns. Community rejoices. Sterling collapse deepens. Rosa was organizing paperwork into neat, trembling stacks. Devon sat cross-legged on the floor, doodling shapes that looked like hands frozen mid-motion. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to breathe. Hart leaned against the table, loosened his tie. We detonated a decade of corruption with one drive. The DOJ just called the evidence systemic. That's their polite way of saying biblical. Rosa exhaled, half in disbelief. So, we won. Across the room, Eleanor signed from her chair by the window. Winning, she said through her hands, is only halftime. Before Hart could respond, the desk phone buzzed. He pressed the button. Hart. A man's voice came through. Calm, precise, bureaucratically friendly. Mr. Hart, this is the office of Deputy Director Klein. Mr. Klein requests Mays Blackwood's presence immediately to clarify matters related to her testimony and recent disclosures. Hart straightened. Clarify in what sense? The voice didn't answer. He said it would be in everyone's best interest. Then the line went dead. Rosa's hands fluttered. He can't just summon her like that, can he? They can, Hart muttered. And they just did. Eleanor stood, calm as glass. We go. Hart looked at her. Eleanor, this smells like a trap. Bradford's gone, but Klein, he's quieter and twice as dangerous. He'll never yell. He'll drown you in paperwork. Eleanor's reply was sharp, almost gentle. If I hide now, silence wins back everything we gained. Hart sighed, grabbed his coat. Then I'm coming with you. 35 minutes later, they stepped through the Civic Administration building's rotating doors, marble, glass, echoing halls where footsteps felt like signatures. Security waved them through. The receptionist's voice carried that neutral kindness only found in government offices. Mr. Klein is expecting you. Conference room, 4B. Hart's jaw flexed. Perfect. Nothing says casual conversation like a numbered conference room. They followed a narrow corridor lined with framed portraits of men who all looked like they'd never lost an argument. At the end stood Klein's assistant, immaculate suit, unblinking smile. Ms. Blackwood. Mr. Hart. This way, please. Klein's office was clinical. No family photos, no art, no clutter, just symmetry and silence. The man himself stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. Silver hair, immovable composure, eyes that seemed to calculate even while resting. Ms. Blackwood, he said, turning. Mr. Hart, please, sit. Eleanor didn't. She stood. Hey, interpreter, besid here. Hart waited a beat, then lowered himself into a chair anyway. Klein's smile didn't reach his eyes. You've had quite a week. Eleanor signed without hurry. Truth multiplies when it's aired, Hart translated. Klein tilted his head slightly, as though inspecting an artifact. Indeed, he said, though truth, like air, can also corrode if left uncontrolled. He gestured toward the chair again. Please, I'd prefer this feel cooperative. After a moment, Eleanor sat. Klein moved to his desk, opened a leather folder marked with color-coded tabs. Let's discuss your Bronx renewal project. Eleanor nodded once. It's ambitious, he continued. Mixed-use housing, sustainable energy integration, community resource centers, the kind of utopian ideal journalists adore. He slid a document across the desk, a grid of permits, all stamped and initialed, but utopias require permits, environmental, structural, financial, each one a gate. And unfortunately for you, I happen to sit on several of the committees that hold those gates. Hart's lips tightened. Are we talking about oversight? Or are we talking about leverage? Klein didn't glance his way. Process. Mr. Hart. Nothing more. He looked back at Eleanor. You understand process. It's the reason civilization doesn't eat itself. Eleanor's fingers moved with precision. Process should protect the public, not shield the powerful. Hart's translation landed like a pin dropped in a cathedral. Klein smiled. Faintly. You remind me of myself 30 years ago. Only I learned that sometimes the greater good requires control, not crusades. He stood, walked to the window, and spoke as if to the skyline. Bradford was a parasite, greedy, careless. He overplayed his hand. But you, he turned, you're dangerous because you believe in something. He came closer. I can manage greed. Belief is messy. Eleanor's signing was brisk now. Belief is what remains when greed collapses. Hart voiced it. Klein almost smiled. So poetic. Klein murmured. You see, Ms. Blackwood, I don't oppose your ideals. Housing, equity, accountability, fine slogans, but you've destabilized an ecosystem. Investor spanits, budgets freeze, workers suffer. Order phrase? He paused. That's the real contagion. Order built on silence isn't order. Eleanor replied. It's obedience. Klein considered her for a long moment. And obedience keeps the lights on. He returned to his desk, tapping the folder gently. Here's the situation. Your project requires clearance from the Environmental Review Board and the Zoning Commission. I serve as deputy chair on both. Hart tensed. You're disclosing a conflict of interest. Klein's eyes glinted. I'm disclosing influence. There's a difference. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. You're threatening to bury a community project because it exposes you. Klein spread his hands. I'm threatening nothing. Bureaucracy is its own weather. Sometimes storms, sometimes droughts. I simply predict climate. He met her gaze evenly. If you withdraw quietly, no one loses face. If you don't, he gestured to the window, the rain-slick city below. Paperwork can be terminal. Hart's tone sharpened. That's extortion. Klein shrugged. That's governance. Eleanor rose. Her chair legs scraped softly against the floor. If you destroy this project, she signed, you confirm everything I've ever said about you. Klein stood as well. Mirror calm. Ms. Blackwood, I don't destroy. I delay. People forget delayed things. He extended his hand across the desk. We both know how this will end. You'll comply. For the greater good. She didn't move. Then, with a deliberate slowness, she signed a single sentence. Klein frowned. What did she just say? Hart met his eyes. She said, you mistake Kiat for control. Klein's smile returned thinner, colder. We'll see. Outside, the air was heavy with mist. They crossed the marble lobby in silence. Hart finally spoke. That was civil war disguised as diplomacy. Eleanor kept walking. He won't fight in daylight. He'll bleed us with procedure. Then we find proof, Hart said. We expose him the way we exposed Bradford. She nodded once. Rosa can help. She knows the records. Rosa's apartment smelled of coffee and printer toner. Stacks of municipal files lined the table like fortifications. Devon slept curled up on the couch, one hand still holding a pencil. I found something, Rosa whispered, sliding a folder toward them. Klein's approvals, the ones that kept Sterling Realty projects moving. They're not real signatures. Digital overlays, copied from a 2019 form. Hart blinked. Forgery. Rosa nodded. At least 3. If we can trace who uploaded them, we can prove he falsified authorizations. Eleanor's hands moved quickly. Chain of custody. City servers. Rosa said, each access log has a timestamp, but we'd need admin credentials. Hart exhaled. Getting those legally could take months. Eleanor's eyes hardened. Then we don't get them legally. Hart hesitated. Eleanor. That's a line. Bradford crossed it to hide the truth. She signed, we cross it to reveal it. He rubbed his temples. You've got a dangerous sense of symmetry. Night. The municipal records basement. Rows of cold servers humming like sleeping animals. Rosa's ID badge clicked green at the reader. The door sighed open. Hart whispered, we've got 15 minutes before the logs refresh. They moved fast. Eleanor stood guard near the corridor, her shadow long against the tile. Hart connected his drive to the central console. Okay, he muttered, fingers flying. Pulling audit logs. There, lines of data streamed across the screen, user tags, timestamps, authorization codes. Then Hart froze. Administrator M. Klein. Timestamp. 2 days after Bradford's arrest, Eleanor leaned over. He altered approvals retroactively. Hart's voice dropped. He's covering his own trail. A noise, footsteps. Faint. Echoing from the hall. Hart yanked the drive. Go. They slipped out the side exit just as a security flashlight cut through the dark. Back at Rosa's apartment, they gathered around the laptop. Hart decrypted the files, and the evidence bloomed across the screen. User M. Klein. Action. Modified document access. Sterling Holdings. Approval. PDF. Date. 2 days post-Bradford indictment. Rosa whispered. He forged it to erase his connection. Eleanor nodded slowly. Bradford was the puppet. Klein is the master. Hart stared at the data. With this, we can take him to the Ethics Commission. But if we release it now, he'll know we hacked city servers. Then we speak first. Eleanor signed. Before he controls the narrative, morning light spilled across the office as Eleanor drafted her public statement. Hart hovered behind her, marking phrases in red ink. Deputy Director Klein acted outside his authority. That's libel. Unless we file evidence concurrently, he said. Then file it. Eleanor, once we do this, there's no going back. She met his eyes. There never was. Hart picked up his phone, ready to call the press liaison, and froze. The screen lit with an incoming number, Federal Agency Caller ID. Unknown, he answered cautiously. Hart, a male voice, cool and professional. Mr. Hart, this is Special Agent Rivas with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're contacting you regarding unauthorized access to municipal servers last night. Hart's pulse spiked. Excuse me. The voice continued, unbothered. A complaint was filed directly by Deputy Director Martin Klein. We have a federal warrant for Ms. Blackwood's immediate surrender for questioning. Across the room, Eleanor watched him, her calm expression giving way to quiet recognition. Hart lowered the phone slowly. They're coming, he said. From the street below came the rising wail of sirens, faint. Then closer, echoing through the rain. Eleanor turned toward the window. Her reflection merged with the city lights. As she lifted her hands, deliberate and steady, the puppet pulls back. She signed. Hart swallowed hard. What does that mean? Eleanor's eyes stayed on the skyline. It means the master just made his move. The flashbulbs didn't stop. They pulsed through the courthouse lobby like strobe lights at a crime scene. 2 days had passed since the arrest warrant, but in the eyes of the city, Eleanor Blackwood had already been tried and condemned. Reporters shouted as she stepped from the black sedan, escorted by Hart and 2 marshals. Ms. Blackwood, did you exploit a minor? Did you use a child for illegal data access? Are you still claiming corruption at City Hall? Eleanor said nothing. She moved with that same impossible calm, hands folded, gaze steady. Her silence felt less like surrender and more like strategy. Hart leaned closer as they walked through the metal detector. Keep your composure. Klein's people are watching for one misstep. He's already miscalculated. She signed, her cuffs clicking softly. He thinks silence is weakness. The chamber wasn't a courtroom, but it wanted to be. Rows of chairs filled with city officials, journalists, and bored interns pretending not to stare. At the center, a long oak table divided the room. The Ethics Commission on one side, Eleanor and Hart on the other, and at the far end sat Martin Klein, immaculate, in a charcoal suit, not smiling, he didn't need to. The chairwoman, an aging bureaucrat named Judith Carver, adjusted her glasses. This emergency hearing is convened to determine whether Ms. Blackwood's actions constitute ethical misconduct under Municipal Code 24, Lee. Section 3 specifically, the exploitation of a minor for unauthorized data retrieval. The words echoed. Exploitation of a minor. Devon's face flickered in Eleanor's mind, 10 years old. Earnest, trembling slightly when he first signed. I can help. Hart whispered. They're not trying to convict you. They're trying to erase your credibility. Carver nodded toward a woman seated beside Klein Dana Voss, counsel for the city, Klein's chosen Blade. Everything about her was calculated. The tailored navy suit, the precise tone that carried authority without emotion. Madam Chair, Voss began, rising smoothly. What we have here is not heroism, but manipulation. Miss Blackwood enlisted a minor, the janitor's son, to perform illegal access into city servers. She then publicized the result, manufacturing a narrative to damage Deputy Director Klein's reputation and to advance her stalled housing project. She pressed a button on her tablet. The lights dimmed, a screen descended. A video began the same clip from the media leak months earlier. It showed Devon's small hands moving in ASL, Eleanor watching him with fierce pride. The voiceover, one of those sensational news anchors, twisted every image. The so-called savior of transparency, now accused of using a child to do her dirty work. Hart shot up. Objection that footage is manipulated and lacks verified context. Carver's gavel struck once. Noted. Proceed. Ms. Voss. Voss paced deliberately. Ms. Blackwood claims the moral high ground, but what she really did was recruit a child into criminal behavior, a child she could control. The pattern is classic. Mentorship as exploitation. Sympathy as strategy. Hart rose again. Your Honor, this is a smear disguised as ethics. Devon Martinez volunteered his assistance in a public meeting. There was no coercion, no exploitation. Voss turned, interrupting with surgical precision. And yet, the child was present during a federal investigation. He handled sensitive data. Tell me, counselor, does a 10-year-old consent to that level of risk? Hart's voice tightened. He wasn't the hacker. He was the translator. Semantics. Voss said, smiling without warmth. You can call it translation. The law calls it access. Through it all, Eleanor sat still. Every flash of Devon's image, every twisted phrase, landed like quiet thunder behind her ribs. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. When Voss finished her presentation, the room's air felt thin. Carver looked down the line of commissioners. Thank you, Ms. Voss. Mr. Hart, your response. Hart rose, his voice controlled but shaking at the edges. Ms. Blackwood's record speaks for itself. 30 years of service. Zero disciplinary actions. The claim that she manipulated a child is absurd, especially given that the so-called victim has never filed a complaint, nor have his guardians. Then why isn't he here? Carver asked sharply. Because he's 10, Hart replied. Because you'd turn this into theater. Klein leaned toward his microphone for the first time. With respect, Mr. Hart, Ms. Blackwood's age and reputation do not place her above accountability. The integrity of this city demands that no one, not even its heroes, operate beyond ethical scrutiny. Eleanor turned her head toward him, slow as a clock hand. Her signing was subtle, almost invisible. You're not defending integrity. You're defending your empire. Hart translated aloud. Deliberately, the words landed like a dare. Klein's jaw twitched, but he didn't answer. Oars passed. Objections. Counter-objections. Motions denied. By mid-afternoon, the commission called for a brief recess. The crowd buzzed whispers, predictions, journalists typing headlines in real time. Hart rubbed his temples. They're stacking the deck, carvers in Klein's pocket. Unless we break the narrative, they'll recommend censure by tomorrow. Eleanor looked toward the hallway door, where Rosa waited calm, unreadable. Then we change the narrative. She signed. Now, Hart followed her gaze, then nodded slowly. You're thinking witness testimony. Yes, hers. When the commission reconvened, the room had shifted somehow. Anticipation coiled tight. Hart stood. Madam Chair, the defense calls Rosa Martinez. Voss raised an eyebrow. The janitorial staff, the executive assistant to Ms. Blackwood. Hart corrected. And the mother of the minor in question. Rosa approached the stand, palms damp but steady. Devon watched from the back row, eyes wide, unaware of how much hung in the air above his mother's head. Hart smiled faintly. Mrs. Martinez, can you tell the commission how you came to work for Ms. Blackwood? Rosa nodded. She offered me the job after she exposed Mr. Sterling's corruption. She said people like me deserved a seat at the table, not just a mop. A few people in the gallery murmured. Hart continued. Did Ms. Blackwood ever instruct you or your son to break the law? No, Rosa said firmly. She protected him. She made sure he was never left alone with data or devices. My son only translated what was visible, what everyone in that room could see. Voss stood, voice sharp. Mrs. Martinez, you recently gained access to Ms. Blackwood's files. Yes. Perhaps you found something you wish to keep secret. Rosa met her eyes. Yes, I did find something. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Even Hart froze for half a heartbeat. Then please share it, Voss said triumphantly. Rosa reached into her bag and pulled out a printed email. She handed it to the clerk. This, she said, was buried in the archives I was helping to clean. It's an internal memo dated 5 years ago from Deputy Director Klein's office. Klein's head snapped up. Hart approached the bench. Permission to read. Madam Chair. Carver hesitated, then nodded. Proceed. Hart unfolded the page. His voice carried, clear and deliberate. 2. Bradford Sterling. Sterling Realty Holdings. Subject. Confidential legal coordination. He looked up. Dated March 14, 5 years ago. And signed. Martin Klein. A ripple spread across the chamber. Hart read on. Please ensure the firm maintains our joint counsel confidentiality with regard to the pending injunction against Ms. Delgado's community action. Utilize the Privacy Protection Clause to suppress her testimony if necessary. We must prevent another spectacle. He lowered the paper. Ms. Delgado, for context, was a community advocate silenced after accusing Sterling Realty of illegal zoning practices. Her case was dismissed on the exact same privacy clause Klein is using today against Ms. Blackwood. The room went dead silent. Klein's composure cracked for the first time. That document is inadmissible. It's stolen property. Hart shot back. It's city property, recovered during record maintenance, and it establishes a pattern. using ethical loopholes to suppress whistleblowers. Voss tried to interject, but Carver was already scanning the memo. Her lips tightened. "Mr. Klein, is this your signature?" Klein hesitated too long. Old correspondence, taken out of context. Rosa's voice cut through the tension. "Same excuse Bradford used. Same lawyer. Same Lee." Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Hart pressed forward. "Madam Chair, I move to dismiss all charges against Ms. Blackwood and to refer Mr. Klein's conduct to federal oversight." Carver's gavel trembled slightly as she struck it. "Motion granted for review. Effective immediately. These proceedings are suspended, pending investigation." Klein rose slowly, every inch of him vibrating with restrained fury. His gaze found Rosa a look that promised consequences. But Rosa didn't flinch. She met him squarely. The quiet strength of someone who'd scrubbed the marble floors of men like him for years, and finally realized she was standing above them. Eleanor turned to her. "Thank you," she signed. Rosa smiled, tears welling. "You gave me the key," she whispered. "I just opened the door." Hart leaned close. "That's one hell of a reversal." Eleanor nodded. "Not reversal," she signed. "Correction." The cameras followed them as they stepped into the corridor. But this time the noise was applause, not accusation. Reporters shouted questions, but the tone had changed. "Ms. Blackwood, do you plan to press charges against Klein? Is the Bronx Renewal Project back on track?" Hart shielded her with his coat as they made their way to the elevators. "You just turned his own machine against him. He'll be reeling for weeks." Eleanor signed faintly. "Weeks aren't enough. He'll rebuild?" Rosa joined them, clutching her folder tight. "Then we stay ready." As the elevator doors slid shut, Eleanor caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. The cuffs were gone, but the fight had only shifted form. She thought of Klein's word, "I archive, I don't bury," and she knew he wasn't finished. Still, for the first time in months, she allowed herself one small breath, not of victory, but of vindication. Outside the courthouse, Klein stood in the rain beneath the overhang, phone pressed to his ear. "Contain it," he said coldly. "No more leaks. No more martyrs." He paused, listening. His expression darkened. "Then find the janitor," he said softly. "The mother knows too much." He hung up, pocketed the phone, and stepped into the waiting car. The rain swallowed the sound of the door closing. For the first time in weeks, the city outside Rosa's apartment felt quiet. No reporters, no flashing lights, just the hum of Harlem traffic and the faint crackle of a TV. Someone forgot to turn off 2 floors below. Devon sat cross-legged on the living room floor, piecing together his Lego crane. Eleanor watched from the couch, one leg crossed neatly over the other, a teacup balanced in her hand like it was part of her anatomy. Rosa moved between them, ladling stew from the pot she'd been tending since morning. "This," Rosa said, setting a bowl in front of Eleanor, "is what victory tastes like. Not champagne, oxtail and patience." Eleanor smiled, eyes soft. "Better than champagne," she signed. Devon looked up. "How do you sign oxtail?" Eleanor mimed a tail swish and laughed silently. Devon giggled so hard he nearly spilled his juice. It was the first real laughter since the storm began. Hart had gone home an hour earlier. After 3 phone calls and 1 exhausted hug. "Rest," he'd said. "You've both earned a night without war." For a brief stretch of time, it felt like he was right. Eleanor leafed through Devon's sketchbook as they ate, page after page of hands, some human, some abstract, drawn in graphite precision. The last page stopped her cold. It was a sketch of 3 people, Devon, Rosa, and Eleanor, standing together under a beam of light. Above them, written in careful, blocky handwriting, were the words, People don't listen until you make them. Eleanor's throat tightened. She tapped the page, then looked at Rosa. He's an artist. Rosa shook her head, smiling. He's a mirror. They sat like that. 3 survivors sharing food and silence until the rain started again, drumming gently against the window, like applause from somewhere far away. Across town, in a room that never saw daylight, Martin Klein sat at his desk, sleeves rolled up. The city spread beneath him like a chessboard. He didn't look angry. Anger was for amateurs. He looked focused the way a surgeon looks before cutting out something diseased. A single lamp lit his face. On the desk sat a stack of photos. Eleanor, Hart, Rosa, Devon, each labeled with a name and a date. He moved Rosa's photo to the center. "Find me everything on her," he said into the phone. His voice was low, deliberate. "Employment records, medical history, immigration, if any. I want leverage, not noise." A pause, then a dry male voice on the other end. "You want pressure or silence?" Klein's eyes stayed fixed on Rosa's picture. Pressure first, silence if necessary. He hung up. Outside the window, thunder rolled. Rosa woke early. Habit 6 years of cleaning offices before dawn had wired her that way. Devon was still asleep, sprawled across his sketchbook. Eleanor had left a note on the counter. "Meeting with Hart back by noon. Don't wait for me." Rosa smiled, tucked the note into her pocket, and headed for work. She wasn't cleaning anymore. She was assisting. She wore a navy blazer now, carried a security badge that said executive office, but the elevators still made her nervous. Inside the office, the world was subdued. Half the staff were whispering about the hearing, others were pretending not to care. Rosa kept her head down and went to work cataloging Eleanor's files, until she noticed something strange. A folder on the shared drive, time-stamped that morning, titled Cicero Draft. She frowned. The name meant nothing to her. She clicked it open. Inside was a single PDF, a payment authorization for $1.2 million, drawn from the Blackwood Community Fund, paid to a company she'd never heard of, Cicero Urban Development, LLC. The signature at the bottom made her breath catch. Eleanor Blackwood. But it wasn't her signature. Not really. It was too clean, too digital. Rosa had seen Eleanor sign dozens of papers, always in pen, always with a small looping flourish. This one was flat, mechanical. She checked the metadata. Created 5 years ago. Modified 3 months ago. That was impossible. Eleanor had been on medical leave 3 months ago. Rosa's stomach turned. She opened another folder, Archive, Legal, K Transactions. Same pattern. Old community projects. Reopened. Money moved in circles that led nowhere, every path ending in the same dead company. Cicero Urban Development. She whispered to herself. "What are you?" Cicero. By noon, Eleanor hadn't returned. Hart was in back-to-back interviews with the press. Rosa sat alone in Eleanor's office, the Cicero file open on her laptop. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Hart. His voice came through rough with exhaustion. "Rosa, everything okay? I found something," she said quietly. "Something bad." Define bad. Bad as in money moving through Eleanor's fund to a shell company. Cicero Urban Development. The payments go back years. And the last edit came after Bradford's fall. Hart went silent. Hart. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. "Rosa, listen carefully. Cicero was a redevelopment plan from a decade ago, a joint venture between the city and Sterling Realty. I thought those were all shut down. They were. After the whistleblower Daniel Reese died in a car accident, the file was supposed to be sealed forever." Rosa's hand tightened around the phone. "Are you saying this was a cover-up?" Hart finished. And if that file just reappeared, someone's trying to clean the trail. Her eyes flicked toward the window. The blinds were drawn, but she suddenly felt visible. "Hart," she whispered, "what do I do? Leave the office? Right now. I'll send security." But as she grabbed her bag, the lights flickered once, then went out. In the sudden quiet, Rosa's pulse thundered in her ears. Emergency lights glowed faint red across the ceiling. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked shut. "Hello," she called softly. No answer. She moved toward the hallway, phone still in hand. The building was never this quiet. Even at night there were footsteps, printers, chatter. Now, nothing. A silhouette appeared at the far end of the corridor, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a maintenance vest. He carried a toolbox in one hand. "Evening, ma'am," he said casually. "Power surge. Just checking the breakers." Rosa tried to smile. "It's noon?" He smiled back polite. "Practiced." "Yeah. Weird timing." "Right." Something about his voice froze her. Too calm, too rehearsed. He stepped closer. "You're Mrs. Martinez, right?" "Ms. Blackwood's assistant." Rosa's mouth went dry. "Who's asking?" He tapped his badge. It wasn't a maintenance ID. It was blank plastic. Rosa backed up slowly. "I'm calling security." He shrugged. "That's fine. I'll wait with you." She turned, sprinted into Eleanor's office, and slammed the door. Her hands shook as she locked it. The phone buzzed. Hard again. "Rosa, what's happening?" "There's someone here," he says. "He's maintenance. He's lying. Get out through the back stairwell." Now, the knob rattled. A calm voice outside. "Ma'am, you forgot your phone charger." She backed away. "Go away." The voice grew lower. "Don't make this hard." A metallic click. Not the door, the sound of something sliding out of the toolbox. Rosa's chest tightened. She looked around, window too high, vents too small. Her eyes landed on the side door, Eleanor's private archive room. She ran for it, ducked inside, and pulled the door shut behind her. Rows of old blueprints and hard drives, no exit, only a small, frosted window. She pressed her ear to the door. Footsteps, then silence. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Hart. "Hart, security on the way. Stay hidden. Don't talk to anyone." "Hart." "Rosa, listen. Cicero wasn't just zoning fraud. Reese's death wasn't an accident." Rosa typed back with trembling fingers. "Rosa, what are you saying?" A pause. Then, "Hart, I'm saying Klein was involved. He used Cicero to funnel bribes through Sterling's accounts. Reese found out. That's why he's dead." Rosa stared at the message. Her reflection in the glass looked foreign, smaller, older, suddenly fragile. From outside came a soft knock. "Mrs. Martinez." The man's voice said, "You shouldn't have found that file." Rosa froze. The door handle turned once, twice, then stopped. A pause. Then the unmistakable scrape of metal, a lockpick. Her heart hammered. She searched the shelves, grabbed the only thing heavy enough to use a steel binder. The lock clicked. The door began to open. The man stepped halfway in, eyes cold, smile friendly. "Working late? Who?" He took one step closer. "Towers like this can be dangerous after dark." Rosa gripped the binder tighter. "You don't want to do this." He tilted his head. "I don't want to, but I have to." She swung hard. The binder connected with his arm. He stumbled back, cursing. She bolted for the door, sprinted into the hall. But another figure was there, blocking the way. This one smaller, hooded, a blur of motion. Before Rosa could scream, the hooded figure shouted, "Mom!" Devon, her son. He'd followed her from school. The fixer's gaze shifted, calculating. "Well," he said softly, "that complicates things." Rosa pulled Devon behind her. "Run." The man smiled again. Same empty politeness. I don't think so. Behind them, the lights flickered again. Then everything went black. Darkness swallowed the room. For a heartbeat. There was only breathing Rosa's ragged, Devon's quick and terrified, and the faint metallic click of the man's tool hitting the floor. Then emergency lights flickered back to life, a sickly green glow washing over the corridor. The man's silhouette sharpened, one hand raised, the other slipping behind his back. Don't do anything stupid, he said, voice steady. I just need the file. Rosa moved in front of Devon. You won't touch him. He smirked. I wasn't planning to. His gaze darted to the laptop on Eleanor's desk, still open, still glowing faintly. That was when a new sound cut through the silence, the soft ping of a phone notification. The man frowned. Rosa glanced down. Devon's smartwatch vibrated once, twice, then buzzed continuously. A voice filled the hallway, calm and clear through the speaker. This is Eleanor Blackwood. You're on camera. The fixer froze. What? The overhead fluorescence blazed on, flooding the hall with light. Two security guards rounded the corner, Hart behind them, shouting, "Step back." Now, the fixer turned to run, but a guard tackled him hard against the wall. His toolbox clattered open inside. Not wrenches, but data drives, burner phones, a silenced handgun. Rosa pulled Devon close as Hart reached her. You all right? She nodded shakily. How did... Hart gestured at the smartwatch. Eleanor rigged a remote trigger, said if she didn't hear from you by 5, she'd light up every feed in this building. Rosa exhaled. The sound was half laugh, half sob. Hours later, the police swarmed the building. The man whose real name was Thomas Varick refused to talk, but the contents of his drives told the story for him. Offshore transfers, surveillance log, internal memos from Klein's office. Eleanor, pale but composed, arrived as the evidence piled up. She stood beside Rosa in the observation room, watching detectives catalog the devices. Hart whispered, "This is enough to bury Klein." Eleanor shook her head. "Not yet." Rosa frowned. "What do you mean?" Eleanor turned to her, eyes dark and sharp again. "Evidence alone isn't justice. Klein's built his empire on bureaucracy paper shields. He'll deny, delay, and dissolve. We need sunlight, not paperwork." Hart nodded slowly. "Public disclosure." Exactly. That evening, Eleanor called a press conference impromptu, unapproved, unfiltered. The conference room overflowed. Reporters, staffers, flashing cameras. Rosa stood behind her, trembling but steady. Devon watched from the front row, hands clasped. Eleanor didn't use a teleprompter. She signed, slowly, every word. She said aloud through her interpreter. Not for herself, this time, but for them. For years, power in this city has been hidden in files like Cicero, names scrubbed, voices erased. Today, we end that silence. The evidence you're about to see links Deputy Commissioner Martin Klein to the embezzlement of public housing funds and the suppression of whistleblowers, including the death of Daniel Reese in 2015. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Flashbulbs exploded. Eleanor gestuurd. Rosa stepped forward, holding up a drive sealed in evidence, plastic. This is the Cicero archive. My assistant, Rosa Martinez, risked her life to recover it. She is the reason this truth exists. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then roaring. Devon's eyes shone. Eleanor waited for quiet, then finished. Justice isn't the absence of noise. It's the courage to keep speaking when you've been told to stay silent. The feed went live to every major network. Across the city, Klein watched from his penthouse office, face gray under the flickering TV light. The camera zoomed in on Rosa's face, tired, proud, unafraid. For the first time, he understood he'd underestimated her. By morning, the arrest warrant for Klein was issued. Investigators traced millions in diverted funds to his shell accounts. The mayor's office launched a full inquiry. Rosa, meanwhile, refused interviews. She returned to work quietly, cleaning up the office that had nearly cost her life. When Eleanor found her, she was rearranging the files, restoring order. "You could take the week off," Eleanor said gently. Rosa smiled faintly. "If I stop moving, I'll start thinking." Eleanor hesitated, then offered her hand. "You reminded me why I started this foundation. It wasn't the buildings. It was the people inside them." Rosa looked down at their joined hands, one scarred by labor, one by leadership, and nodded. Weeks later, a community center ribbon cutting in the South Bronx. The same project Bradford once mocked. Children laughed in the courtyard, their voices rising above the city's noise. Devon stood beside Eleanor, translating her brief remarks for the crowd. "Every brick here carries a name, not mine, not the board's, but yours. Every voice that fought to be heard helped raise these walls." Applause rippled through the humid air. Rosa watched from the steps, arms crossed, tears catching the sunlight. When the ceremony ended, Eleanor leaned close to Devon. "You were brave," she signed. Devon smiled. "You too." Then, almost shyly, he added one more sign, one he'd invented himself. Hands clasped, released, and lifted upward, free. Eleanor understood. She turned to the crowd and said quietly, "Let's begin again." The wind shifted, carrying the sound of laughter and hammering the noise of a city rebuilding itself, one truth at a time.